Srinivasan. I'm an artist and designer. I've been a part of this forum. I've been listening to some talks, and today I have the pleasure of introducing Prerana. So Prerana kind of kickstarts the series of young designers and young thinkers and their presentations. And Prerana comes from just a recent graduate from the Nitty School of Design, and she has just submitted her thesis and her proposal. So she believes that spaces are connected to nature and they have the power to heal, and brings in empathy and sensitivity into her design. Her recent project focuses on creating a multidisciplinary design system that can normalize exclusion and work towards accepting marginalized communities as they are. So it's a social design project which works with social inclusion of sex workers through architecture and design. And I will hand it over to Prerana to take us through the process and the project. And Prerana, you have about 30 minutes plus maybe 10 over that, and then we can have an interaction after. So over to you.
Thank you, sir. Hi, everyone who's present today. And I would like to thank everyone for taking the time on a Sunday evening to be here. So since like sir has already given my introduction, I will just take you through my work. And I would like to thank Deepak sir for always like he's been the main anchor and mentor for me throughout the thesis, and I would like to thank him. And I'll just take you through my work of closely to a 9 to 12 months of work. And I'll try to like tell everything that I have done in detail as much as I can with the limited time I've got. Yeah. Hello. Sir, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Yes,
we can see.
we're able to see.
So shall I continue?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So my topic is a solidarity center. This is my final year thesis project, and it basically talks about a design system which addresses the exclusion of the people in the society. So the aim of the project was envisioning social inclusion of sex workers through architecture and design. So I'm an architecture student. So the entire idea was how me being a student can kind of influence or contribute to the society in terms of spaces. So initially, it started off with why this topic. So the few things that every panel used to ask when I kind of put this forward was why the particular group of people were chosen, or why exactly this topic. So it started with a very small thought, I could say, like since a kid I used to watch people at the signals, and it was like I was very curious to know why these people are employed this way, or why do not have a normal life like we do. So that was a basic curiosity that was in the head, and I started reading up about it, and I really wanted to do something to the marginalized communities as such. So this was one basic instinct, and this is a kind of statistics we talk about the prostitution in the entire world. And even though in fact it is one of the biggest black market contributor as well, and it has been all underground because of the kind of stigma that has been associated with them, and as well the social barriers. So I started reading, collecting data, try to understand more about the entire community. So my role was to empower. So the idea that I had was to empower the social communities, and that I could look into how the marginalization can, like how I can be a catalyst in turning marginalization to normalization. So I basically want to define what social inclusion is. So I was looking at how people who are excluded, being marginalized communities, can be involved in the society in terms of only because of uh, their caste, creed, or the profession. So they were all like stigmatized because of those concept. So I was looking at how we, being a storyteller or translator, can do. So I made a pyramid where it looks into how me being a storyteller can not just be about the buildings, but also I want to create spaces that bring in opportunities which can create impact to the society in terms of like even having a kind of interaction with the public, or at least having their own livelihood, or at least having their basic facilities that are not met. And then in turn it looks into a complete goal as social inclusion. So when I was reading about exclusion of the particular, I will explain it in the few coming up slides why I chose the particular marginalized community. But the major reason for the marginalization of the sex worker community was that one was the diminishing of the urban spaces or public spaces. So this is one of the processes that can be seen how the city started growing, and like people started having these more personal and very private lives, rather than having initially, like we can see in Turkey and all, they had these big piazzas and big spaces where people would have community gatherings, they would have community events as well. But eventually we see that as the decades go by, all these public spaces are diminishing. So people do not have a concept of where they can interact with a bigger group, or they do not have a idea or space where even if they want to interact, they do not get the right set of people who they can interact with. So there is not much of a variety there. And then second process that I felt was that led to exclusion was the historic processes. So in a context of India, since I wanted to do something in context of India, I looked into what the entire history of the sex workers was. So it started off with Devdasis, where we all know that Devdasis were actually given a lot of respect before. And once the Devdasi system collapsed, that is, it collapsed because of the collapse of temple system, and that happened because of British rule. So it's like a hierarchy. So like the invasion of British rule happened, and then there was collapse of temple system, and that is how the entire profession of Devdasi system started becoming underground, because people didn't really recognize them anymore, and they were like misused as well. So these were the two major reasons how the entire profession had a turnover. And I have written down what are the issues, or what are the elements that led to the marginalization. So I'll give a brief context about why we should look into social inclusion. So based on the data, it says that exclusion affects two major elements. That is, one is the human and one is the social capital. So human in terms of the dignity, because they do not get a basic livelihood, they do not get basic needs of their for their living. And then also there are statistics and data which proves that the kind of marginalization or the kind of stigma that is associated with them, and the social pain, like we can state it as, is actually equivalent to physical pain, just only because of being uh, given away from few of the values and few of the spaces, or even few of the rights of their own people. And then second is the social capital. So the World Bank has looked into few of these stats where they talk about how the entire group does not actually the income of the entire group doesn't really add up to the GDP of the country. So the annual productivity of the country is majorly affected. So these two were the major reasons why we should look into how we can envision why social inclusion is needed. And in turn, it looks into a wholesome picture where it even benefits the entire stakeholder, and also it benefits the society as a whole. So I had the various communities to pick from, being like destitutes, drug addict victims, to tribal communities, LGBTQ, sex workers, and refugees. I kind of got inclined to sex workers, and my entire project looks into how we can assist this particular group. But the project also has derived certain design strategy that can be applied to the various other marginalized communities as well. So it kind of has a few tweaks here and there, but then the major framework remains the same. So this is the kind of map that shows the prostitution in the context of the world. So the spaces, I mean the countries which are denoted in red are the places where prostitution is illegal, and places which are orange are the places where prostitution is legal, but then the brothel keeping and pimping is not legal, and the gray ones are the ones where the prostitution is legal. So we can see that the entire, like, there is a good amount of countries which actually reflects on the entire profession in the countries. And and the next map shows about the red light districts in Indian context. So I did few case studies to just understand the red light districts, to understand the group that I am looking into. And since the entire project was done during the pandemic first wave, so I have all the data which is pretty much accumulated from the um, digital medium. So these were few case studies that I happened to read, and then the issues that has been faced by them. So few of the major issues that has been faced by the entire community is that they do not have opportunities, they do not feel safe, like basically they feel alienated in the, even in their own place where they're living. And there are a lot of NGOs, in fact, that are working towards this cause where they can help the entire community. But most of them are not even aware of the kind of health facilities that have been given, because they do not have right exposure, and they do not have a sense of identity or like self-respect as well. And one more major thing that I noticed with the red light districts are that they're pretty much cramped up places. So they do not have spaces or pockets where they can actually meet, like even like a group of 5 sex workers can meet together and kind of chat. So that entire idea of public space was entirely diminished, due to which people were in their own nooks. So that was the entire issues that have been faced by them. And so basically, I talked about the historic processes that has been taken place. So I've just replicated the same thing in a graph, and also about how the industrialization and like how the Devdasi system has been existing till now, but how because of the Muslim rule and as well as the invasion of British rule has all been in overlap, and it shows how the decline of the status of women in prostitution has been declining since the period of Devdasi to the present day. Um, so this was so after I read about the red light district, I did a detailed case study of one red light district in India, and it's the GB Road in Delhi. So basically, the entire case study looks into how the architectural spaces work. As in, there isn't any architectural space, but I just wanted to understand in terms of me doing a building intervention, how should the places work. So I looked into how the entire lanes in the red light district work. So one typical thing that I noticed in this red light district was that uh, even though it is a stigmatized place by the entire society, it was a very new thing in GB Road, is that the entire road, the entire GB road, where it was known as the red light district, is actually having been split into two sectors. So one is prostitution, and one is being the automobile and hardware businesses. So what they do is they have like two parallel roads. One is GB road, and exactly parallel to the GB road is something called as Fasil road. So the Fasil road is comparatively narrow to the GB road. So that road has been accessed and is also very dingy. So what the people from the prostitution do is that they access the more narrow, that is the Fasil road, and they access the spaces which is above the ground floor. So in case we look at the spaces that they work, the entire ground floor has been occupied by the automobile and the hardware businesses, and the floors above the ground floor has been accumulated for the prostitution industry. So this was a very typical way of how there is a mutual symbiotic relationship between the two industries, and also about how even though the stigmatized people were in the place, even the GB Road is known to be one of the most known places for prostitution. So I just wanted to understand, and I also try to analyze why people used the Fasil Road, and a few of the interviews state that people preferred, the sex workers prefer to use Fasil Road because of the lack of identity and also safety. So there were few sex workers who complained about in case they used the GB Road, they were harassed or they were not looked up in a proper way. So they felt more safe to use the Fasil Road. So it also shows that how people wanted to have like a secure feeling, and they're not really being accommodated in the society well. I'm not really sure if you can see the sections well, but this was the kind of section I was talking about, where the ground floor has been occupied by the automobile and the industry spaces, and the one on the left road, on the left is the GB road, and one here you can see with a small narrow road is the Fasil road. So I've just tried to put it in form of sections where we understand it better on how the places work. So these were few design processes and mind mapping that I did in terms of understanding how can I do an architectural intervention. So I wanted to understand how we can go about a system which accepts people for who they are and gives them an opportunity where they can come and uh, how they can come and just put out their talents, and they can be accepted on that, on the same platform, rather than being looked in the same view like how they have been looking for decades altogether. And these were the few design ideas in terms of what kind of spaces could have been involved, in terms of being it a public space, or being it a more private space, or being it a space which can be within the city, or it should be taken out from the city and put in a other place. So all these were few to and fro's and come and I did in terms of understanding what I should be exactly doing as a architectural intervention. So I came up with a design strategy which talked about being breaking down the entire process into four steps. So the entire so basic idea was how I can involve the markets, the services, and the spaces together, and how I can also look into the how we can recognize the ability of the people and give them an opportunity to develop those abilities. And once they develop the abilities, they get an opportunity to put their talents out. They can put it up in a platform where they can be accepted by the people for the kind of talents they have or the kind of work they have done. So this can be done in terms of either the kind of spaces they work in, or in terms of the kind of employment they provide, not employment, basically the kind of services they provide. And third one could be in terms of the markets. It could be like any product they're doing, or it could be some craft, or it could be even paintings, or anything for that matter. So basically the four steps that I had break down the entire design strategy was to be um, so the entire process for achieving the design strategy was recognizing social exclusion. So this happens at the community level. So a community level here, I mean by the red light district. So what happens in this phase? So the entire phase is divided into four. Like from social inclusion to social exclusion, there are four steps. So first steps is recognizing social exclusion. So here what happens is we take the smaller phase, or a smaller group of people in the red light district. We execute it with a small prototype where we have trust building activities with the NGOs that are already involved in these sectors. And also we can look into how we can build trust with the community people. And once these people, uh, once the trust is gained by the people, we can look into how we can enhance their abilities, give them opportunities. So this again happens at the community level, where I have picked a site. I'll show it in the next few slides. So here I'm looking at a system where it can be a learning center, or it could be a space where people learn or recognize their abilities, and they also have a space where they can explore their abilities and explore their opportunities, and then in turn the dignity, like I have mentioned again. And then there are multifaceted avenues, that is market, services, and spaces. And in the end, when all the three phases are complete, we can look into a system where the entire process looks at a goal, which is social inclusion. So people have been bonded for the kind of talents they have, or they can have a open mind about what the stories of the community people are. And also look into a way that people can be given a chance to at least be a part of the society. So my program was divided into three spaces basically. One was the major anchoring space. Here I mean by anchoring space is the bigger, like a bigger architectural space, which has a proper built up and structure as such. Secondary spaces was mostly looked into those spaces that can be open and semi-open, so that it gives a kind of nice blend to a public space. Since I've already stated that there are a few, there is a history of diminishing public spaces. So I was looking into how my project can have a lot of open spaces where people can come, gather, and interact, whereas there's also learning simultaneously going on. And then in the end, I looked into supportive spaces as well, basically, majorly, which looked into NGO pods and police pods, because uh, this entire idea is very new, and there are so many limitations of the project as well. So there could be few incidents that can be occurred due to the wrong mindset of people as well, and nobody to blame here, but still there, it is always better to have a surveillance until the entire pilot run is successful. So the entire project also looked into how we can have few NGO pods and police pods, where which looked into the surveillance of the people and also of the public as well. So the project looked into enhancing the public space. So it was a setup that had to be done in the city. I will just explain on how I have picked my site and why I have picked my site. So in case everyone's wondering about so I had to look into how this project also is going to be executed in terms of funding or in terms of stakeholders. So I came across these articles and a system where something, it's called as impact bonds. So impact bond basically talks about how a private organization takes up a social cause, and they look into the entire funding and also the entire profit and loss of the system. But it is good in a way, because the NGOs or the CSRs, whoever are involved, they do not have to really look into the financial aspect, because we have been noticing that most of the NGOs are not having many success stories because of the funding and because of the kind of ideas they have, but they do not have the financial status to execute it. So here is where the impact bonds come into picture, and they say that we will bear up all the cost of the projects that you want to execute. And since that has already been taken care of, the NGOs or the or even the people who wants to do something for the uh, uh, empowerment of the community can entirely focus on the working of the system rather than the financial aspect. So this was a very like a backbone to the project, I can say, because financial status was the main thing that comes into picture when it is for these marginalized communities, because they are not even looked into the status of being a part of the society. So these are few newspaper clippings which talks about the success stories, and it talks about how impact bonds have been working in few places. And to name a few, it is Infosys doing few works, and there are CSRs, and there are even like smaller restaurants that have taken up these ideas, where the entire restaurant in Mysore has been run by sex workers, and it has been running successfully even after the people knowing that it has been by run by HIV positive sex workers. So these are few success stories, and there was one success story that happened in Kolkata. It was a freedom festival, sex workers freedom festival. So what happened here was that there were 216 different nationalities that had taken part um, in this festival, and it was not just a festival with the sex workers, but also there were different sectors of people who are involved. So this talks about a first step in how people have actually moved towards accepting the people and also giving them a chance. So my project was envisioning on how the NGOs and these platforms can be using my project where they can execute their ideas. So when I had to do few case studies in terms of architectural build-up, I looked into two aspects. One was in terms of aspects where it looked into the climatic conditions. It looked into the kind of spaces that can bring in a lot of people, and what kind of elements bring in people. And the second idea was social design ideas, because the project is kind of inclined to the social design as much as it is inclined to architectural design. So when I was looking into the kind of program I had to derive, so the first case study that I looked into was in Spain. So what this no, not in Spain, Brazil. So what this looked into was that my project also was envisioning to the same idea, but the only difference here is that the project here was a learning center, and the marginalized community here that was addressed was a drug addict victim community. So since I mean, there's a community which is in Medellin, which has been known for being the most dangerous city in the world. It was in the 2010 stats. So it said that it was the most dangerous country in the world. And eventually, once these there was a lot of interventions that were done in this space to kind of make it a better living place, and one of the architectural intervention that was done was the learning center which was done here. And these three boxes that we can see talks about how one space is a learning center, one space is a library complex, and one building talks about how it is a space where people can interact or have spaces such as theater, auditorium, and drama, and all those events in terms of having interaction with the people. And second place looked into adaptive reuse. So basically it talks about how a abandoned building or a building which has been old can be revitalized and used for a betterment of the public spaces. So I looked into, because eventually my project also looks into a site that I've picked as a existing building structure. So I looked into this project as well to understand the components that I should be looking into. And the next couple of case studies also looks into how these spaces are the public buildings, and how it caters to a not just one particular category of people, but various categories of people as well as various age groups of people. So I looked into what kind of programs they do and what kind of spaces they have in terms of having a larger crowd that it attracts. So, and then in the social design aspects, I was looking at how we should uh, looking at the first one was the Antwerp red light district. It looked into how we can have better street lighting in terms of safety, and it can also have spaces where they can socialize and they can. So this Skipper's Quarters is a very unique red light district where uh, the project looked into how, so the government looked into, there was a lot of crime that was going on with the red light district. So there was this one simple thing that the government looked into taking it up, was that they did it a pedestrianization zone rather than a vehicular zone, and that cut down the crime rates to like 80%. So that was one of the most biggest impact that the project had. So I had to look into these social design elements as well, which can kind of be incorporated in my project as well. And it looked so basically I looked into a pedestrianized zone to be inclined to. So I had to pick a site, and for criterias, I had like four criterias for picking my site. So one was it that I wanted to pick a port city, because the entire historic processes, like I mentioned before, was that the invasion of British made a biggest impact to the profession to have an upturn. So one of the major ideas was to pick a port city, and second one was that I did a mapping of these. NGOs and the CBOs that have been existing in the particular red light district or in a particular area that looks into the benefits to give a benefit to the community. And then third one, I looked into being it an extension of an existing RLD, red light district. So having all these criterias, I had to narrow it down to Mumbai or to Kolkata, because they were both the port cities, and also they having a red light district as such. But since then I started doing the mapping of the NGOs and CBOs, it was very phenomenal to see that the Kolkata and the Sonagachi red light district had a lot of NGOs and CBRs, so I felt it would be more easier for me in terms of having this entire project executed. And also, I had to look into when I started digging up. There was also this Freedom Festival and historic processes that had took place in Kolkata, the Sex Workers Freedom Festival. So that was a thing to be started off with, and picking a site in Kolkata. So once I started picking a site in Kolkata, the issue was that I couldn't really do an intervention in the red light district. So I picked up a site called Surat Jute Mill. So this is in Fool Bargain in Kolkata, and it is around 5 kilometers from the red light district. So I have four dots here. So the first highlighted the circle is where the red light district is, and the second highlighted point is the intermediate zone. So the between two points are where I have intermediate connected zones, and then the fourth one here where I've shown the green dotted line that has been going. So that is where my my prototype of my pilot run would be done. So in the first red light district, the site that I picked in a red light district was a very small playground, and that is where I would have my first phase of a design strategy that would be involved. That is having a small intervention where the people have a trust building activities with the NGOs, and they look into the vision of the entire project. So when I had to pick my site, I picked it in a 5 kilometer radius from the red light district. And since it was like a distance which would be alienated from the red light district, I was looking into how I can connect the prototype site with the red light district. So I had few intermediate points as well to have a connectivity, and also I had reasons to why I have put these connected elements with in from the point 1 to point 4. So I did a mapping of the, like I said, I did a mapping of the NGOs. So these sites that I've picked are very close by to the NGOs that have been working towards the same cause. So it was easier for the surveillance, and it also looks into how public can be involved at various nodes, and then it can be brought into a bigger prototype. So Yeah, these
Prerna, will you be wrapping up in a couple of minutes?
yeah, I'm
We'll have
almost
some
done.
time for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah. So this was basically transit connectivity from the red light district to the site, and what kind of spaces they were, prototype site, and what were the kind of NGOs that were around it, and what kind of space it is. So this was my site, and it talks about the evolution of site that has been abandoned for so long. And this gray part is the existing building, and these are the buildings that have been existing. So my intervention had to be within the area of 6 acres or 6.6 acres, and I've been seeing like the entire culture of the Kolkata has been involved in that space. So this has been the complete idea, and I can't really go into the details of the architectural spaces as such, but it mainly comprises of learning centers and these centers where it has theaters and market spaces. So basically, it's like one wholesome project where it talks about even giving them an opportunity to learn what they want to, and give them an opportunity to explore what they can their abilities are, and also give a platform where they can produce or like exhibit their work. So these were few of the spaces and the kind of master plan I had. And this is all architectural ideas on how I should be looking into the entire massing and how the climate can be taken care in the zoning of the spaces, and few of the floor plans which I will not be getting into detail. And yeah, the sections as such, these were the kind of materials that I was thinking of using, because the funding is a major issue, and these can be prototype can be lifted and put it back in another place to give it a pilot run. So these were the few spaces and materials that I thought, and ideas that can be executed at node zones. So yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Prerna.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So thanks for a very energetic and fast-paced presentation. Maybe we can have some comments or a dialogue with Prerna.
Prerna, can you close the stop screen? Thank you.
So if anybody has any questions or clarifications or comments, please do share.
Certainly, there is a few people who have extensively worked in this area. Are the Suresh actually has been founder of Equations, and he's now heading the Action Aid. We all have worked extensively in this area. Suresh, do you want to comment upon, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Narendra. Thanks for sort of volunteering me to comment.
Yeah. You're welcome, sir.
Prerna, that was an excellent presentation, and thank you for bringing the spatial dimensions of some of the interventions. I must say that it's not been my forte to look at these spatial aspects in the way in which you have both connected and calibrated that aspect quite interestingly. I mean, the layering was very interesting for me to listen to. I would have benefited a little bit more if the second part of the presentation was foregrounded a little bit. That, because that was really where your creative thought process was embedded, and it would have been excellent to unpack that, because unfortunately the constraint of time that we all have, so I guess it's not we probably need to listen to you 3-4 times to understand the amount of work that you've put packed in. I think the historicity is important to understand, but the historical in many ways also changes over time. And one of the dimensions that you brought out, which I think is important to understand in the broader context of sex work, is of course the legality and the illegality dimension, because that in in a big way sort of imprints what you can or cannot do. I mean, perceptionally, what you can or cannot do. I mean, of course, there are many things that you can do, even if it's seemingly not doable kind of thing. But um, I would really love to hear a little bit more about how you chose the radius and what were the elements that you decided to put into when you were thinking through that dimension of space. Yeah. At the moment, that's what I'd like to
Sure.
request you to speak about. Yeah.
Um, I'll just share my screen. Can you hear me?
Prerana has a little technical issue, yeah, so that's why her computer camera is suddenly stopped working.
Prerna, it's okay. Just talk about it, maybe, even if you can't show it. Your mic is off.
Yeah. Yeah. So the entire idea was that I couldn't really do architectural intervention in the red light district because, like you mentioned, it was about the legalization. So when it came to the funding, they weren't really ready to fund a project which was in the red light district. So they were very clear about me picking a site away from the red light district. So when I was looking into the spaces and the kind of dynamics of the space that I wanted to create, I was looking into a much larger site like I was looking at. So it had to be a minimum of 5 acres. And looking into the spaces in and around the red light district, I finally found a space like 5 kilometer radius. And also one of the idea was that I wanted to bring them out from the red light district area or the kind of surrounding context that I wanted to bring them out from. So it was that cannot be done from a red light district to a site away 5 kilometers in one go. So I had to look into how I can connect them with few intermediate points. So it happens as a process where first it happens at the red light district. So if I can like in my 5 kilometer radius, which I had broken down into 4 nodes, one of the node was in the red light district, which was an open ground. So there I looked into spaces like these shipping containers and these kind of wooden structures, which can be a temporary structure. So they can be taken out from the place when once that entire activity is done. And again, it can be replicated in another city as a prototype. So the first 3 nodes out of the 4 was majorly the entire idea of creating a temporary space or the space which can just attract the crowd in terms of activities that we can create. So the first one was with so the first one happened at the red light district itself, and the second one was closer to a existing NGO that has been working towards. So the NGO supervision would always be there, and the surroundings at that place was mostly residential. So the kind of activities that a stakeholder in here, like being the supervision group, being the NGO, can inhibit these activities which can even involve the crowd of the people in the residential area. But when I came to the third node that was near it was to the it was again an open ground, but then it was in opposite to the college and one of the oldest college in Kolkata. So and it had this historical reputation as well. So I looked in here when I created this space. I looked into how the space can have these spaces where people from the people like the beneficiary groups. I mean, like the with the sex workers, they even also have their kids who are not getting equal rights. So I looked into how the kids of the sex workers can come to these places where they can interact with the college students, which is right opposite to my side, so they can have an interaction and they can develop a bond. So like here it looks into how even different age groups of the sex workers community, be it not directly involved, even they can be benefited. So these three nodes happened and it was almost like closer to my site, and the fourth node was the site that I had picked, like 5 kilometer radius. So once these processes took place in every node, I envisioned how my entire project at the city level can make an impact. So that was the entire idea of being pulled them out from a 5 kilometer radius, or like segregating my entire spaces and the idea for a radius of 5 kilometer in terms of spaces. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. But like I said, I think we should probably have more conversations around it. Yeah, it's brilliant work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Certainly, I will share you the details of how to contact Suresh. Thank you very much, Suresh.
Thank you, sir.
So Prerna is probably going to get some seed funding to do a small pilot, but she'll have to. She's thinking of Bangalore as a site, so
Yeah.
she could be in conversation when it actually happens, when if she gets the opportunity.
Yeah. The like we have been looking. I've been looking forward for getting funding. So it's still in the process, but I have looked into how I've even done a cost estimation and the kind of uh, like the entire project would take up and where exactly it can be incorporated. So I've done a bit of uh, study on that as well. I'm just looking for funding now.
Questions, actually. We have Professor Menon, Riti Menon, Professor Riti Menon, Dhanraj, Bindu, Maria, open to everybody.
So if I might add, sorry, go ahead.
Mohan. Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I was keenly listening to the presentation, and it was done at a time when during the COVID time, and it's. I mean, I'm a new entrant to the whole. Of course, I have been associated with design, but in the not in the social context in which you have been doing. But it's very interesting. I mean, presentation. I have no question really to ask, and I wish that you get opportunity to really do this in the field itself when you are able to go to the wherever Bangalore or wherever you plan to do. Thank you, Narendra,
Thank
and thank you
Thank you.
others for this.
Thank you, sir.
Professor Riti Menon, Maria, Dhanraj.
Hi, Prerana. You
Hi,
have
ma'am.
been talking about the inclusion of the sex workers in the social context, no? Do you
Yeah.
think it is very easy with such projects? You have been telling that we have to, that interaction with the neighborhood and all those things. Eh?
Definitely. So when I'm like looking into the limitations of the project, like one of the major limitation of the project is that it is dependent on the people and the mindset of the people. So if I'm looking at a public, even if I'm gonna do a pilot run of this, it's gonna be like a nightmare for a major group of people, because in terms of the mindset of people in India, in fact, especially such a project can be executed in a much easier terms in a Western country. But when we're talking about Indian context, is definitely difficult. But that is when I kind of backed it up by saying that there are a few steps that have already been taken for such a idea or such a mindset. So one of the step that I talked about was that Freedom Festival that happened in Kolkata, and it had like 262 different nationalities. And in fact, when I'm talking about the entire group which was involved in the event, was like nearly to 15,000. So if that can happen in like one place, so the similar thing, so that is just one step that has been gone forward or gone closer to the idea. So I'm just hoping, and being a designer, I really need to hope for the optimistic visions. So I looked into how definitely one of the limitations, like I said, is dependent on the people, but I'm hoping out of the 100 people, maybe at least 20 of them believe in this idea and we can take this forward.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Uh, can I
Yeah,
ask
Bindu.
a question?
Yeah, Bindu.
Hi, Prerana. Thanks for a very nice, very interesting presentation. My question is this: you worked in this whole the context is the red light district. So
Yes.
there is an issue of a ghettoization of sex workers. So my question is, how do you then, taking off from Dr. Reddy Menon's question, how do you kind of mainstream them, or is it easier to work in a red light district? Would you prefer that cities have a red light district so that it's easier to work, or would that further alienate sex workers? How do you resolve that?
Ma'am, I didn't quite get your question. I mean, are you like referring to the entire existence of the red light district only,
Yeah,
or like are you okay?
yeah,
Uh,
that's what I want to know. Whether
okay.
cities should have red light districts, or whether that further alienates them.
Okay. So I actually read few research papers in the very beginning to just understand the community. So there is this concept in Bangladesh where they looked into how they can completely legalize or completely legalize the sex work, and how we can look. So what happened was that we cannot really look into the entire profession to be legalized, or we cannot even look into how we can completely abolish. So there has to be a balance between them, because legalization cannot happen, because in turn it leads to a lot of human trafficking. In fact, this is one of the uh, true story that has happened in Bangladesh. So we cannot look at this Nordic model which looks into legalization, but we cannot even look into a system where we say that this system should not be existing. So looking into the context of India, we should definitely, legalization is not a part of the country right now. I mean, we have not legalized prostitution, so that is still better than having a lot of human trafficking and legalization. So now we should just look into a system where we can have police synthesization, like we can have a system where people can be empathetic toward the group, but also have in the mind that they are also humans and they need to be respected, because end of the day it is also a profession. So we cannot talk about being alienated or being given any kind of a statement where they are like being allowed to be in this place, or are they allowed to continue the profession, because it's a personal choice again.
I have a question
Yes.
too. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Actually, it's a power-packed presentation. You try to, although we have a time constraint like Suresh was referring to. I'm also keen on the idea of the design part. One of the things I appreciate is that you brought in the idea of recreation as a fundamental right, and associating dignity with that. That's a beautiful thing. You are actually what we don't see much in Indian context. We still believe it's actually only a commercial activity than kind of a dignity elevating process. So that's a beautiful part. Where did you get that kind of an inspiration to take it forward? One. Number two, how are you going to implement? Because actually, in the given the city, the idea of development now taking place, where shopping malls are the idea of recreation,
Yeah.
or water theme park is the recreation, then social engagement as a recreation. So what is the way forward you suggest in your
Yeah.
design? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, coming to the first question in terms of how did I get an idea of this, bringing in this concept of recreation. So I was reading a lot of articles and also about these empowering the communities. So I came across few, and one of the project was this project in Delhi. It's called Delhi Heart, and it's one of my case study as well. So it looks into how we can empower the music composers of the city. So it looked into how these entire spaces cater. So one of the element that they had looked into was that they looked into spaces where they have these plazas where they can perform, but they also looked into spaces where they can teach people who are involved, and they also had few stalls where people, I mean the music composers, can sell their products. So once this intervention was brought into the place, a lot of people started coming to this place as a recreational space. So that was one idea when I thought, when something like this can be done for a group of music composers or people who have a music background, such a thing can also be done to different communities. So this was one of the example, and the other of the example has also been like how in these places, I'm not really sure of the place now, I do not remember, but there were places where a smaller intervention just like an OAT was done, and they had few street gym equipments that has been involved, and there was one wall with graffiti, and then there was few places where they had done vertical farming. So even though that space was a very small space, there was a lot of things happening, and it brought in a bigger crowd as well of various age groups. So I thought maybe such a thing can be brought into my project also, so that it enhances the urban space and the public space as such. And when I was thinking about the second question, could you please repeat? I kind of forgot.
Question is actually how do you nowadays the idea of development is largely about this
Ah, right.
shopping malls and water theme park and all, where
Right.
you are trying to bring in a sex worker and their family and
Right.
as an opportunity to social interaction and elevating the dignity.
Okay. So what I did in my project was that my project had four components. One was a component which had a learning center, and second component was a component where it had these workshops and these spaces where people can like learn or develop their skills in terms of soft skills, not the soft skills and hard skills. And learning center basically looked at a space where people can be educated or like tutored or mentored under, whereas workshops and these soft skill spaces are these spaces where they can have the self learning processes going on. So these two were the components which would be in relation or in contact with the public, and these two were the major components. But also to bring in the crowd for these two major components, what I did was I had this space where they could host these sports events and food events, so that people come in for food gathering, because there are, I mean, food and sports are these two things which bring in people, no matter what kind of background they have, what kind of age group they are in. So this was one of the major element that I brought into my project, where I had spaces where they can host events, sports events, and also these food melas. And eventually, when all this is happening in any mela that you go, you also have these markets as well, where people can sell their products. So once they kind of develop their activities in these workshops or in these woodworking workshops or the crafts and all that, they can have their own small stalls where they can sell it off, and eventually they earn a earning as well. So that was the entire idea of how I can bring the crowd to this place, and it could have lot of age groups in it. So it is not, I mean, the project does not even talk about it is being catering to one age group or to one sector of the society. So it was a very wholesome and inclusive project that I kind of looked into.
Thank you, Prerna. It was wonderful, actually. I'm sure this is a seed. I was reading the other day one Japanese proverb. It says, "Every seed is a world." So I'm sure it'll take a world will open up. And yeah, I'm handing over to Deepak.
Thank you, sir.
So I guess we are run out of time, and I think we should wrap up. But yeah, Prerna's enthusiasm actually is something I would like to appreciate as one of our external mentors, because even with design students, you try so hard to get them to go into an unlearning process before they actually use their design tools to engage with the social context. It takes a while. And someone in her 4th year, she just started talking to me, and some of the early conversations, she remapped or reoriented her perspectives from structural, kind of interventions to actually looking at social process. And she has tried a lot to bring that into her work, despite various things at institutional level and everywhere. So that's a great thing. And of course, there are gaps in the process, and I would really like to see how we can also think through architecture in terms of like inclusion and exclusion. And I think it's a great start, if you ask me, especially for social design in our context in India, and as someone who's interested in public spaces myself. So thank you for the conversations.